Hey, welcome back, Ram fans. Another drop here for you as we head into the schedule show, the NFL schedule release show coming up Wednesday night. Before we get to that, I'm going to share a few notes and we're going to continue our tour through NFC West position groups. This episode we'll be talking about the tight ends. And the NFL, as they tend to do, have been leaking out some scheduling bits and pieces and showing on the screen here all of the announced international games. And the Vikings back-to-back in England. They take on the Steelers in Ireland and then come back the next week and play the Browns in England. The Chargers have an international game as well. And, of course, the Rams at the Jags in London. And it's worth talking about the miles traveled for each of these franchises. And typically, West Coast teams are always at the top, bunched up at the top. And in fact, the Rams come in at second, the Seahawks third, and the 49ers fifth in miles traveled. The Chargers over 37,000 miles, the team traveling the most. The Rams at number two with 34,832 miles. But it is worth mentioning that they're going to ease the pain a little bit for the Rams. My prediction is they will play Atlanta or Tennessee or Carolina and then move on to London to play the Jags the following week. So in other words, think of the trip to London. I think it's 11,000 miles. They're really going to have a stopover in Atlanta. So this mileage isn't taking that into account. It'll actually be you can reduce this total by the trip to Atlanta, basically subtract that out because it's just a stopover, as I say. I'm predicting that, or it could be Carolina or Tennessee. I'll be very surprised if that is not the case. As I said before, that's how they did it in 2019. Rams played at Atlanta on their way to England to play the Bengals. And by the way, that game in Atlanta was Jalen Ramsey's first game with the Rams, and they won that one, of course. So it is daunting when you look at these numbers. The Bengals, 8,700 miles traveled compared to the Chargers, 37,000. Crazy. Now, you would think that would be a great argument to give these teams with low mileage the international games, but the NFL doesn't really care too much about that. They're thinking viewership and attendance and expanding their market, and they figure the Rams-Jags would be a good game, I guess. I think the Rams are becoming a very attractive primetime attraction. And the other thing we learned, I'm pretty sure this is certain at this point, Turkey night, Thanksgiving night, the Bucks at the Rams at SoFi, that appears to be the case, just broke a little while ago. And it appears to be 100% true at this point. There's a slight chance it's bogus, but from what I am seeing across social media, I don't know if the NFL has officially announced that, at least at the time I'm recording this. But Turkey night, Bucks at Rams, and you know what? It's cool. The Rams are getting a primetime game, but Thanksgiving's kind of sacred in our house. We love watching football. We like watching football games that don't matter, though. And now we got to stress through a Bucks-Rams game after Thanksgiving dinner. It's going to be a little complicated with the family, but we'll figure it out. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. I do this once a year, I think. With the schedules about to be released, you're going to hear a lot about strength of schedule. And I think it is one of the most deceiving stats there is. And I'm not talking about because we don't know who these strong teams are going to be, which teams are going to improve and end up being tough teams on the schedule, where right now they might appear to be a weak team. What I'm talking about is the basic construct of the schedules. And it's actually not as pronounced this year as in years past, especially in the NFC West. But what I'm getting at is, there were times when the Rams were bottom feeders, last place teams, and they'd come out with one of the toughest schedules in the league, and it's easily explainable. I'd hear people, how can the Rams have such a tough schedule when they were a last place team? And look at it this way: if you're a 7-9 team, it's actually much worse than that some years. You're in last place, and let's say you're 5-12. You're not going to get to play the 5-12 team, are you, in your division twice? You're going to have to play the first place team that might have been 12-5. So it's just a natural result of the construct of the schedules that last place teams on paper will actually have the tougher schedule because they don't get to play themselves. And likewise, the first place teams sometimes appear to have, they do have an easier schedule on paper. It's because they're playing a 5-12 team twice. Now, this year, it's especially interesting because the 49ers, a last place team, actually have the easiest schedule in the league. And that is because they get the NFC South and the AFC South, as well as those three last place teams. So the addition of those three oddball games takes away reduces the impact of that last place, first place schedule. But if you're ever wondering why first place teams sometimes have easier schedules than you think they would, it is because of that. But again, those three extra games are diluting that to a significant degree. Before we roll on to the tight end discussion, it is episode 736. Now, I was going through my notes, and I don't think I talked about this player. Maybe I had it planned, and too much going on for me to go back and dive through these episodes. According to my notes, I did not talk about number 36, Jerome Bettis, and it's a painful subject, actually, and maybe that's why I didn't talk about him 100, 200 episodes ago. 5'11", 252-pound running back out of Notre Dame. The Rams selected him in the first round, 10th overall selection in the 1993 draft. Played 3 years for the Rams. Pretty productive, 796 carries, 3,091 yards, and 13 TDs. Now, by then, in St. Louis, Coach Rich Brooks was supposedly going to a more of a passing attack. They talked to Bettis about potentially playing fullback. He was not happy, asked to be traded, and the Rams took care of that, traded him to the Steelers, and it was a lopsided trade. I think they got a second and a fourth rounder, but gave up a third rounder or something like that. It did not turn out well for our Rams, and Bettis went on, of course, to have a great career with the Steelers, 10 years there. But Jerome Bettis, if he's often included in the list of great Rams running backs, not sure if he should be. 3 years, pretty productive, but he's probably 6th or 7th on my list because, man, we have had some great running backs here with the Rams, haven't we? So let's get into the tight end talk. We'll talk about the 49er tight ends first, the great George Kittle, and then Luke Farrell and Braden Willis. Now, Kittle, one of the best in the business, getting up there in years, though. He's 14th all-time in tight end receiving yards, 7,412 yards, 47 TDs, and he's done some damage against the Rams, hasn't he? He's entering his 9th year. So his numbers, he's basically doubled up on Tyler Higbee and not slowing down. Last year, 1,106 yards, 8 TDs, and he just signed a 4-year deal. 31 years old, signed a 4-year deal for $76 million. And I don't know the details of the contract, but that sounds like a risky one for the 49ers, but they probably have an out. I assume they do. Farrell, he came over from the Jags, 4 years with the Jags, 36 catches, 318 yards. And then there's Braden Willis and Ross Dwelly, both pretty much afterthoughts. After Kittle, I don't know, not a lot of depth there, not a lot to lean on. But I have to tell you, George Kittle's probably one of my favorite 49ers, if there is such a thing. It's hard to dislike George Kittle. I don't like him much when he's making big catches against the Rams, of course, but yeah, he brings a lot to the game. A cool guy, has that tight end university he runs, and he's it's hard to dislike George Kittle, and he's a great player, obviously. So we'll round up all these rooms at the end here, the tight end rooms, but we'll move on to Arizona. Now, Trey McBride, interestingly, he just signed a 4-year, $76 million contract, and he's an up-and-coming guy. Man, he is one of the best tight ends in the league at this moment. And remember, he had that issue he was dealing with last year, trying to get into the end zone, have an incredible year, no touchdowns until that Ram game, and then he got another one in the week finale against the 49ers. So he ended up with 2 TDs, but didn't really make sense considering how productive he was. 111 catches, 1,146 yards, and those 2 TDs. Now, Tip Ryman, he had 6 catches for 37 yards, and Elijah Higgins actually stepped up. He's entering his 3rd year. He had 20 catches for 172 yards. He had as many TDs as McBride, interestingly, 2 TDs apiece. But it's all about Trey McBride in Arizona. He is going to be a focal point of that offense. And with Marvin Harrison there, they're going to be something to contend with. They just have to hope Kyler Murray continues evolving as a quarterback. So great starter, questionable depth. And then we move on to the Seahawks. They have Noah Fant. Remember, he came over in the trade from the Broncos. He had 48 catches for 500 yards and 1 TD. I always saw him as a solid but unspectacular tight end, kind of similar to how I characterized Kenneth Walker when we talked about the running backs, a serviceable, decent tight end. Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, he's a guy that a lot of Ram fans thought might end up in Los Angeles, but we went Terrence Ferguson instead. And then there's A.J. Barner. It seems like the Seahawks have always had a 2-headed monster or so at the tight end position. They've had moments where guys have really stepped up, but it seems like the last few years hasn't been one single guy. I remember Colby Parkinson was there. So they've had some decent tight ends. Right now, Fant, decent enough. I'd be okay with him as my starter. Nothing to get too excited about, but I'd be really interested to see to watch Elijah Arroyo, see what he can do at the NFL level. And I know Ram fans loved him, and kind of a bummer he ended up in Seattle actually. And then and we'll be comparing Arroyo and Ferguson over the next few years for sure. The Rams tight ends is definitely the deepest group. Tyler Higbee, hey, he's the man, tough as nails. Love Tyler Higbee, probably nearing the end of his career. He came back from a big injury last year, so we can't really lean on his stats that much. Doesn't tell us much, as I should say. Great blocker. And then Terrence Ferguson, the 2nd-round draft pick. I think he's going to be used a little bit differently than the way the Rams have used tight ends in the past. Might characterize him as a large slot receiver as much as a tight end. From what I have been reading, it's going to really create some dilemmas for NFL defenses. And Sean McVay, I think he's been waiting for the right guy to drop some, to get back into the lab and drop some really cool plays for an athletic tight end that can do a little bit of everything. It's going to be really interesting to see how they use Ferguson, and hopefully he answers the bell. But if he doesn't, Colby Parkinson, yeah, he's a little disappointing last year, but if he's your number 3 or 4 guy, not doing too shabby. And Davis Allen, I think he's apparently has some shortcomings in the blocking department, but he's had a couple chances, made a couple big plays over his short 2 years with the Rams, showed some promise, but just hasn't had the opportunities, and we can only guess why. It's probably because of his blocking shortcomings. But, if he's your third or fourth tight end, and I think the Rams will keep four tight ends, especially if they're apparently going 12 personnel a lot. Is it really 12 personnel with Terrence Ferguson out there and Tyler Higbee on the other side? Yeah, I guess technically it is, but who's going to lose snaps in these scenarios? That's the question I have, but that's for another day. Pretty good tight end group. No superstars at this point. Maybe Terrence Ferguson will be that guy, though. So let's wrap this up, these tight end groups. The NFC tight end takeaways here for you. George Kittle in San Francisco, it's all about him. He's going to have to carry the day. They're going to have to hope he doesn't, his play doesn't drop off. He stays healthy because the 49ers, man, they rely on that tight end in that offense. And if it's not Kittle, they're going to be in a world of hurt at the tight end position, in my opinion. But Kittle, in my opinion, is the second best tight end in this division still. In Seattle, Noah Fant, yeah, he's decent enough. They've got to be waiting on Elijah Arroyo for him to evolve. Is it going to be his rookie year where he can step in and really make an impact? And, they got a decent backup there. A.J. Barner's decent enough, I suppose. But at this point, their top dog is probably the fourth best, in my opinion. And then you got Arizona, Trey McBride. He is the real deal. But it's Trey McBride or best, kind of like what the 49ers are dealing with. He's got to get it done now, and I fully expect him to. There's no indication that there's going to be any issues with his performance, with his production out of the tight end position in that offense, because we saw it last year. And, Elijah Higgins out of Stanford, tight end out of Stanford, he did have a minor impact last year playing behind Trey McBride. So Arizona's in pretty good shape. I love Trey McBride. He is the best tight end in this division right now. And then the Rams, it's just a lot of options there. I would take Tyler Higbee over Noah Fant right now. So I'd call him the third best tight end, starting tight end, and who has the most upside in this division right now. I'd probably say Terrence Ferguson in this offense. Really excited to see what he can do, and Colby Parkinson and Davis Allen as backups. I think the Rams probably had the deepest tight end group. Maybe the third best starter, but Terrence Ferguson could change that really fast. But we can't count on that. We can only hope at this point, see how this Rams tight end group evolves. And the one thing they have in their favor is I think they have the best offensive mind to get it done. Now, Kyle Shanahan, yeah, he's a master there, an offensive whiz too, but I don't think he has all the tools to deal with beyond George Kittle. The Rams, they can really do a lot of different things with this tight end group. 12 personnel, 11 personnel, good blocking tight ends. Be a lot of fun to see what happens with this Rams tight end. I'm really excited about it. I think overall the Rams might have the best tight end room, but Trey McBride, he's the real deal. Watch out for him this year. We'll take a look at another position group after our schedule release show. We got to get into that. We'll probably talk about the schedule for a couple of episodes, and then we'll get back into some position groups across the NFL.